Hey guys, Moms Against Medical Bullying. So today I'm just going to go over Pasteur versus Bechamp by Ethel Hume. And it's going to be chapter 15, which is called The Origin of Preventative Medicine. So in 1873, Pasteur was elected by a majority of 1 vote into the Free Associates of the Academy of Medicine. He used his influence to promote the germ theory and to anathematize the very word microzyma, which was coined by Bechamp. So basically, it was frowned upon to use that word, again, which is what generally happens in our world, right? They attach negative connotations to certain words so that people are discouraged from using them or going down the paths of those ideologies. In essence, to make you look or seem dumb. Okay. However, a name was required for airborne organisms. So the term microbe was accepted by Pasteur. The term microbe was suggested by Surgeon Sedilot. That's Sedilot. No. So, but prior to this, Pasteur had been promoting the word microorganism. Pasteur said that the septicism of wounds was due to the air microorganisms, but this was wrong, as they found that the real source was unclean hands that had putrefying matter and such contamination. Which is also explained in Bechamp's microzymian doctrine, which teaches that this putrefying matter with its morbid microzymas can affect the normal conditions of the inherent microzymas of the body with which it comes into contact. So all the while, Pasteur declared danger to arise from atmospheric microbes. Bechamp maintained that in free air, even morbid microzymas and bacteria lose their morbidity, and that inherent organisms, I guess, our own wound or what's in us, are the starting points of septic and other troubles. But in 1870, the specific airborne germ theory had the charm of novelty, and its crude simplicity attracted the unscientific, although many scientists opposed it. With the birth of the airborne microorganisms causing disease theory, arose the mania for inducing sickness through poisonous injection. Pasteur tested his cultures of the so-called chicken cholera microbe on poultry and killed birds with systemic regularity. It came about, however, that a few were accidentally inoculated with a stale culture, and these merely sickened, and they went on to recover. This did not, however, save them from further experiments, and the used hens were now given a fresh dose of a new culture. Again, they proved resistant. This immunity was promptly ascribed to the previous dosage of the stale culture. Pasteur then started to inject attenuated doses into hens and claimed that this protected them from death when afterwards inoculated with fresh the word. I don't know. Can you say the word on YouTube? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll just put it in the, I'll put it in words on the screen. This chicken cholera accident of stale culture was made the foundation stone for the whole system of inoculation. Pasteur accepted the idea of inoculation without personal investigation. Vaccination was becoming controversial. In 1863, Ricord, a famous French physician, was already delivering a warning against transmission of syphilis by the practice. When Dr. Charles Creighton was asked to write an article about inoculation in the Encyclopedia Britannica, he concluded that it was a grotesque superstition. The whole theory is rooted in a belief in the immunity conferred by a non-fatal attack of a disease. The idea arises from the habit of regarding a disease as an entity, a definite thing, instead of a disordered condition due to complex causes. The germ theory of disease, in particular, being the unconscious offspring of the ancient Eastern faith in specific demons, each possessed of his own special weapon of malignity. Thus, the smallpox inoculation introduced into England from Turkey by Lady Mary Wortley Montagu in the 18th century and its Jennerian substitute of cowpox inoculation were based on the ancient Indian rite of subjecting people to an artificially induced attack of smallpox to propitiate Shatula Mati, the goddess of that torment. Believers in the doctrine of immunity may currently retort that seeming superstitions are often founded upon the observations of experience. Be that as it may, what remains for the lover of accuracy is to examine each superstitious belief upon its own merits and test the facts of life in regard to it. The assertion that because many people have had a one and only attack, that they have an auto protection is just a belief. Professor Alfred Wallace says, quote, "Very few people suffer from any special accident twice, a shipwreck, a railway or coach accident, or a house fire. Yet one of these accidents does not confer immunity against it happening a second time. They pick and choose which diseases will get twice or which ones will get once, right? Isn't that true? Like, they chose which diseases were like, oh, if you had it, then you have immunity. And then, like, these other things that people get yearly, well, what happened to that? How come if you get a cold, 1 year, you'll never have one ever again, So it just isn't consistent. Using statistical data available to him at the time, Professor Adolf Boltz supplied a mathematical demonstration that a person who had undergone smallpox once was 63% more liable to suffer from it again in a subsequent epidemic than a person who has never had the disease. Therefore, if diseases reoccur, then immunity is thrown out, especially immunity through inoculation. Certainly, if no, I'm going to quote from her, she says, "Certainly, if no autoprophylaxis is induced by natural disorders, no claim can be made for artificially provoked disturbances." It is shown that with the mandation of shots, that smallpox deaths increased, and that in the British Army and Navy, they had more smallpox deaths, and they were like given multiple inoculations than the unvaccinated of Leicester, excuse me, I can't say that word, Leicester. From Professor Wallace's book, called The Wonderful Century. So in his book, he lays out the statistics of how more inoculation always ended up with more disease. It is thus demonstrated that all the statements by which the public has been reassured as to the almost complete immunity of the revaccinated Army and Navy are absolutely false. There is no immunity. They have no protection. When exposed to infection, they suffer not just as much as, they suffer, if not more, but just as much as other populations. In the 19 years between 1878 and 1896, inclusive unvaccinated Leicester had so few smallpox deaths that the Register General represents the average by the decimal 0.01 per 1,000 population, equal to 10 per million, while for the 12 years 1878 to 1889, there was less than one death per annum. Here we have real immunity, real protection, and it is obtained by attending to sanitation and isolation, coupled with the almost total neglect of inoculation. Neither the Army nor Navy can show such results as this. And that is a quote from Professor Wallace's book. Similarly, the experience of Germany and Japan. With much vaccination, there is also much smallpox, while the Philippine Islands provide us with the most striking example on record. So before 1905, before the systematic general vaccination in Philippines, there was case mortality about 10%. And then as inoculations increased, so did their average mortality. Going more into detail in an earlier issue, December 10th, 1921, the Masonic Observer writes, the highest percentage of mortality, 65.3%, was in Manila, the most thoroughly vaccinated place in the Philippines. The lowest percentage of mortality, 11.4%, was in Mindanao, where, owing to religious beliefs of the inhabitants, vaccination had not been practiced as much as in other places. Or excuse me, in other parts of the islands. So, she ends this chapter by saying, so the facts pronounced firmly against Jenner and Pasteur, yet basing his theories upon a practice already discredited by those who had given it close and impartial scientific study, Pasteur proceeded to inaugurate a system of preventative medicine focused on what he proclaimed to be the ravages of airborne microbes. The attenuated doses, which according to his theory were to prevent natural diseases, did do honor to Edward Jenner by being called vaccines. All right, everyone, take care.